Hello Internet, and today I'll be talking about the HMS Dreadnought and how she changed the battleship game while attempting to pick open one of my Commando locks. But I'm still in the process of rebuilding my skill set, so I'm not entirely sure I'll be able to get this open for you. So, let us begin. So the HMS Dreadnought is the first of the all-big gun battleships. She's not the first battleship by any stretch of the imagination. But all the battleships post her construction in 1906 would be called dreadnoughts, as they would be pretty much built to her pattern, with the exception of the French, but the French are weird in terms of naval history, which is probably worth a whole Locks and Some History video all on its own. And everything before her that was still around would be called pre-dreadnoughts. Now, the standard layout of the pre-dreadnought was 4 big guns, usually 12-inch caliber, set in 2 twin turrets, one fore, one aft, with a secondary battery intended to fling what we would call probably cruiser grade fire 5, 6, 7, 8-inch guns at a much higher rate than you could fire the big guns. And then there'd be a tertiary battery of usually smaller guns than what you would see on the secondary battery to deal with torpedo boats, destroyers, and small, faster attack craft. For these battleships, the big main guns and the secondary guns would all be part of the main armament, and their tertiary armament, the anti-torpedo boat and destroyer guns, would be fulfilling the secondary role. And some of these ships would even have a 4th caliber of main guns on board as well. Needless to say, it made aiming very complicated, because at thousands of yards away, unless you're fighting in ideal conditions, you're going to have a hard time telling the splash apart from that was created from a 6-7-inch shell from that of your 12-inch shell, because big splash is big splash. The HMS Dreadnought quote-unquote solves that issue by having her main battery of 1 caliber identical. She had 12 identical, no, not 12, 10 identical 12-inch guns. And she could deliver an 8-gun broadside with her main armament. But she also had her anti-torpedo and torpedo boat and destroyer armament in her secondary battery. By simplifying the armament, it made long-distance aiming a lot easier. She was also significantly faster than most pre-dreadnoughts, which would cap out at around 18 knots. HMS Dreadnought was 21 knots for a top speed. A significant increase in speed. She could also sustain that speed longer, as she was the first effectively capital ship to use steam turbines versus steam triple expansion engines. Which made it easier for her to run at speed for longer. The reason for this is triple expansion engines they work like essentially the pistons in an internal combustion engine in that they go up and down, versus a turbine is continual spiral motion that drives the shaft, that powers the ship. A much more stable and less we're going to vibrate our own ship apart by going super fast type of propulsion system. HMS Dreadnought was so far and away beyond what any other battleship in the world could do at the time that she effectively reset everyone's capital ship count to pretty much zero, with the exception of the Royal Navy, who built her, which had a capital ship count of 1, being HMS Dreadnought. This began, quite frankly, the multi-way Dreadnought arms race. People will often talk about the Anglo-Germans Dreadnought race, where the Germans, effectively seeing their chance to challenge the Royal Navy, decided to start building dreadnoughts as fast as they could. So for numbers, the Royal Navy was building against the Germans. But in terms of gun armament, they were actually building against the Americans, who would build, eventually, battleships with not only first 12-inch guns and later 14-inch guns. The French would build these new battleships as well. So with the Italians, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, they don't exist anymore. And Japan. And Britain, in the midst of an arms race, build ships for 2 South American nations, Brazil, and I believe it's Chile. Oh, I got it open. And the Americans would build the Reviadari class for Argentina. But that pretty much says something about British shipbuilding at the time, is that we are having a major arms race with another naval power, but we still have the excess shipbuilding capacity to build battleships for other people. Ultimately, Britain would win the Dreadnought arms race because Congress wouldn't truly let the Americans compete at that level. The French hit naval infrastructure limits. The Germans said, geez, we can't keep up. We are going to give up. Japan were just trying to meet what they thought would be their own needs for warships would be like 8 modern battleships and like 8 what would become battle cruisers. I've done a Locks and History video on that concept. Leaving Britain with the, once again, most powerful navy in the world, going into the First World War. And coming out of the First World War, everyone was afraid of, oh no, we're going to have another battleships arms race, which led to the Washington and then London naval treaties, which is where Britain gave up her unquestioned naval superiority, allowing the United States to have, by treaty, an equivalent battle fleet. That said, I'm, despite being American, of the personal opinion that if another naval arms race got kicked off, it probably would have been a 3-way arms race between the United Kingdom, United States, and Japan. Japan, not having an economy anywhere near as big as the other two, would tap out first. And then Congress said, we're spending ridiculous amounts of money on battleships, and would fold second, leaving Britain as the winner, as the only nation who sees its entire national security tied to its fleet, still willing to spend the outrageous amount of money to build a big, mean, and nasty battleship fleet. And then, by the Second World War, carriers were becoming a thing, and carriers would reach maturity to the point where they could become the deciding factor of warfare. And thus the age where the battleship ruled the sea came to an end. So that's the legacy of the HMS Dreadnought from her launch to the Second World War, deciding that the way you needed to exert naval force was with an all-big gun battleship. So until next time, subscribe if you want, and most importantly, have a nice day.